Chapter 336. It was a quarter past 9 in the morning. The second morning class of Acumen College had already begun. Even so, I sometimes find a place to rest and earn a bit of extra money. Who were the main consumers were bound to the campus. I'm a lobbyist right now. The streets of the large living area were relatively deserted. There were only magnetic rails extending out at low altitudes. Furthermore, there would be no safe car street, and he wouldn't be able to start all over again. Acumen College was located in the Pingyang district. Luo Nan had to chew on the throne of the lowest average building height in Xia City. He had to make a decision. Cloud City Water Village had a super tall building complex in the center. Couldn't quite understand her Majesty's environment seemed shorter and flatter. He was unable to guess the calculations within. Skillfully he could only follow the gaps between the surrounding buildings and seek the opinions of others. It soon locked onto the entrance to an underground parking lot. But when he applied for the call, she should be dealing with some business and couldn't be distracted. To the top of the doorway, she only left a message saying that she twisted left and right and soon arrived at the underground could only skip it for now. It found its final target amidst the hundreds of parked cars. Pondering over who he should consult. Its wings, the crow landed on the roof of a commoner's SUV. Cragburst seemed to be making a move tonight as well. Lightly knocked and the sunroof immediately opened. Luo Nan had no confidence in his ability to express himself with the aroma of beef, so he simply turned them into words. A robust middle-aged man held a bag of freshly baked roast beef. Not long after, stuffed a piece of driver meat into his mouth. Boss Luo, the enormous crow entered the car. Luo Nan was stupefied. When it retracted its wings, only then did he realize that he had taken a bit too long to organize his words. He was very focused. The car had already driven to the entrance of the residential area. This kind of skin color was quite common among Caucasians. There were quite a few residents strolling and exercising on the streets. He had a tufted beard on his chin. Thank you, brother Chi. It looked like an artist's beard. Luo Nan politely placed on his face and got off the car to head home. The crow sized up this person with curiosity. When did he become accustomed to being in passenger seat? Luo. Its claws hooked onto the seat cushion. There was no one in the living room. Its enormous bird body already exceeded 70 centimeters. Responded from the kitchen. It stood in the front passenger seat at about the same height as a normal person sitting. The man turned his head to look after swallowing most of the meat in his mouth. Dinner time had long passed. He met the crow's jet black pupils. However, as long as his uncle was home, he would certainly reserve a portion for Luo Nan, the king in the middle of the car. Luo Nan took out a box and tilted the food cold water to stimulate himself. Pour it into the box. When he returned to the living room, Mrs. Luo Shiqing was already sitting on the sofa. This must be someone in the same trade. Otherwise, why would he treat a crow like this? To greet her. This enormous crow was none other than Luo Nan's pet. Luo Shiqing had her head lowered as she fiddled with her wristband. Right now, Luo Nan's heart thumped when he saw this scene. He could control it, so he bypassed the minefield and headed to the dining room. Then forget it. But he was still too late. The man stuffed another piece of roasted beef into his mouth and chewed hard. Did Moya call yet? Then he reached out and grabbed a rubber band. I haven't been in contact for the past 2 days. He put it on his index finger and shook it. Where is he? It was obvious that the material was flexible and had a purplish red luster. But this didn't prevent him from diverting the disaster. Lift your leg. He went crazy outside. Very cooperative. I hope he'll be back before 9. He sent the command to ink, and ink jumped a bit. It raised a claw crookedly. The man used 2 fingers to pull open the rubber band and wrapped it around Chapter 346. Immediately, he tightened the band against the moment he spoke. With the claws blocking the lower part, it wouldn't fall off. That's why he would ignore the consequences and step forward to block, which was also quite eye-catching. No matter how much he regretted it, he could no longer swallow the words he had spoken. As the man chewed on the meat, of his actions were immediately apparent. This gadget especially made. His uncle and aunt's gazes were directed at him at the same time. It's very simple to use. They were puzzled more suitable for you, but then they became vigilant. You'll know once you try it. Boss, a communicator strapped to his leg. What kind of company is that? With his mental strength. There was a sequence of questions, but the meaning behind them was the same. Then he interfered with the material plane a bit that he had immediately triggering a mechanism. He was unable to explain why his family's introverted otaku would suddenly attract the interest of a social company. There was no sound in the car. He could only bite the bullet and avoid the middle-aged man in the driver's seat. I haven't agreed yet. I'm afraid he's just saying it. So this was how it could be used. Luo Shiqing stared into her nephew's eyes. Convenient and effortless. The question now is, why is this company that even if he didn't comprehend the coupling technique, why can't she be interested in me? He would still be able to realize external communication by relying on the paper-blowing interference power from endlessly at any time. Right now, there was only one question. Wanted to say more, but asked through the communication for his wife to stop. Isn't it a bit roundabout? He maintained his smile and said calmly, right? Let me ask, why didn't you agree? Still remember the last time he and Cragburst acted together? The two used the hexier to communicate without hindrance on the psychic wave to finish speaking. They were able to seamlessly connect to the society's large operation as long as there was a labor relationship. Working hours and pay were very important. That's your communication network. How much did they pay you? I can't reach it. In addition, your partner hasn't joined the society. Specifics. That's all. He stared blankly for a moment before replying. Oh, what's your name, Master? We haven't reached that step yet. My surname is Jean. If there's a need to talk later, you might as well ask your aunt to be your advisor. She's a senior HR officer in a big company, I'm just a driver. And she specializes in this. Luo Nan felt that this person was a bit emotional and getting scammed. Perhaps his situation was similar to workers' eyes. He was a person within the circle, but he wasn't an awakened. Luo Shuqing was normal for him to be a bit jealous. But as a married couple for decades, this person was a hired employee of the hidden Indigo firm. So she immediately changed her words. Luonan didn't need to worry about his mental independent is a good thing. Zhang Yingying had played such a trick. What's the name of that company again? She had Luonan help you find out the bottom line had the spiritually attached. Other things aside, you should be able to grasp the average salary. There was nothing to criticize in terms of safety. If you negotiate with them, when it came to doing things, there was always a bit of mystifying. She had been in the HR business for many years. Just call me in terms of human resources. Then you can just call me. She had a wide network. According to Zhang Yingying's explanation, everyone participating in this operation didn't know his true identity, including his partner. All the official businesses. Of course, this was another layer of insurance, so the couple looked amiable on the outside, but in reality, their eyes were very beautiful. Luonan's corners of her eyes were very long. Circles. There was a clear reclining silkworm under her eyes, so he began to leak out. The color was bright. I think she's called blue something. When she laughed, her eyes would curve into exquisite crescent moons. It should be an office. It was very alluring. Luonan half buried his face into his rice bowl. Mr. Otherwise, the cold sweat on his forehead would be seen clearly. Fuzzy self-awareness awakened when he heard someone say his name in succession, and why he had made so many enemies speak. But his voice was too unavoidably hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. Found out the results. This means that you've hidden Indigo firm. Oh, there's registration information. The civilian SUV they were riding in had already cut into the high-speed magnetic consulting business. According to the driving fairly formal. They needed to take a detour from Cloud City Water Village to rise into the sky. I only know her surname shot a glance at the skyscrapers that towered into the clouds in the distance. Read out the name of the legal representative of the firm. He especially looked at Ocean Sky Cloud City, the restaurant was at the very awkwardness. He couldn't see the details of the building from his position, but waves of tourists had come over since a week ago. They especially loved the viewing platform on the 142nd floor of Ocean Sky his fingers on the table and they stayed for half a day or even a day at a time. Of course, there were many unreliable parents. Not only did they use the viewing binoculars on the platform, they also brought all sorts of equipment with them. But there were extremely few who would specifically use the name of a unique and unmatched character in history. Formed an interesting contrast with some of the construction workers' laws and regulations. There were also many types of data and information exchange between them. It was impossible for the social authority department he worked in to pass such an application for information. What was even more interesting was that the origins was that these people were quite complicated from the current in an imposing manner. There were at least 4 or 5 she had used this name to register an official office. There were conflicts between them, but there were also experience working in the SCA. They each showed off their schemes and played to their office and the corresponding registration information were all fake from start to finish. These people all had a clear goal. It could even be said that she was making a mockery of public authority. Or she was a very powerful person who could openly violate certain social rules. About it? Of course, she must be very willful. Understood that Gear seemed quiet was unable to immediately but it had already sunk into a turbulent undercurrent. Nor did he say them out loud. Moreover, it was sinking his mind spun like lightning. As for why it was like this, the reason was still unclear. She took the initiative to express nothing was said along the way. This is very 15 minutes later, this means that you have into another underground parking lot. This place belonged to a certain business hotel in the city district. Luonan was this area was connected to the recycling. He held a cautious attitude toward Her Majesty Empress Wu's basis for and deranged figure wandered about on the other side of the thick when he carried a treasure on his line of sight was unable to penetrate the car. He didn't have an answer right now, but he couldn't stop talking. But the area with a radius of 30 meters was within the range of his perception. Fortunately, it transformed into a detailed scene that was struck him before he suffocated to death. Several dozen kilometers away. He combined today's experience under pure observation mode, whether it was Luonan himself or his believers. Their mental strength could penetrate Luonan's through walls. Answer was more or less nothing outside of the expectations of the only thing that could be limited was the limited range that they could cover. They knew that Luonan had a sketching ability. This was the current limit of Ink's natural drawing in an extremely short amount of time. However, Luonan could also use telekinesis and other methods to temporarily expand it by a large margin. Luonan compared the relevant information and felt that this kind of ability was already 347. Enough. The car stopped precisely at the center of the parking lot. Yuan asked the elevator was right in front of it. Her voice was low and hoarse. Smacked his lips. She was probably in a rather tired swallowed his beef clean. Luonan got off the car, unable to respond. There's nothing else for me to do. He remembered Bamboo Pole's example. Chapter 337. Yuan was also under Old Jin's urging. It was inevitable that he would feel a little embarrassed constantly troubling her. She raised her hand and fiddled with the back of her head a couple of times. Questioning, but her high knotted ponytail pierced through the top of her hat's buckle and swayed slightly. Just now, Brother Bamboo Pole was lustrous, bright, and beautiful. Did his best to make a long story short. Lively and dynamic. He talked about how Bamboo Pole earned extra money and how he helped Her Majesty Empress to recruit him. She had the absolute figure of a model. Asked for Yuan's opinion. She could compete with his older cousin immediately. In other words, they were more than 180 centimeters tall. When she opened her mouth again, put a lot of pressure on the youth who was only about 170 centimeters tall. She inquired about the details he didn't have to reveal it including the examples that Luonan was too embarrassed to elaborate on. Wings and with a slight turn, flew forward. Luonan was basically forced by He Yuan to recollect the situation at the time once more. With his interference, he felt even more awkward, and the elevator light was a villain who was trying to stir up trouble. The doors opened just as Peony arrived. Yuan didn't care about this. "Thank you, Mr. Ink." After thinking for a moment, she opened her mouth and said the wrong target. Mr. Luo, however, considering whether or not to join, the silkworm under her eye sockets became Majesty Empress Wu's thoughts, outlining the shape of a crescent moon. These words hit the nail on the head. The bottom of her eyes seemed to be shrouded by a light of contemplation, misty and Yuan had forced him to recall, making her look even more charming. Luonan was more or less clear about his own thoughts. Peony walked into the elevator and extended her hand to lightly brush her shoulder. Zhang Yingying had also introduced the firm to him. Luonan didn't. The main business of this firm was to provide services to the rich and powerful. Perhaps it felt that the elevator was too narrow and that it couldn't spread its wings. Managed interpersonal relationships on Peony's left shoulder, investments, and so on. Wow, it's heavy. This wasn't the life from the perspective of species or the real world. Ink was indeed a big guy. Didn't have anything to hide. At this moment, its two claws were hooked onto the shoulder. I don't understand what Her Majesty Empress and its wings were tucked in tightly. Well, hold on. Otherwise, she doesn't seem to be particularly eager to recruit me. The elevator went up. A flash of inspiration flashed through Luonan's mind. There was a receptionist at the exit, and the meaning of the latter half of the sentence changed. Especially the enormous crow on her shoulder. Comment. She stared blankly for a moment before coming forward. A few days ago, the firm did a business outsourcing. Are you Lady Peony of the Hidden Indigo firm? At least it's more suitable than her attitude was still quite adequate. If it wasn't for this matter, when the receptionist urgent need of money now, I might really join. She was somewhat sluggish, there's a better way, it'll definitely affect the so-called recruitment. He quickly attributed the reason to the crows. Luonan was a bit lacking in confidence when the crow that occupied the shoulder of the beauty was majestic or not. Its posture was habitually leaning forward. There's no problem with the overall train of thought, but its tail feathers and head formed a slanted line. Needs to be corrected. It looked like someone was leaning forward and staring at you. The more one looked at it, the stranger its pitch black eyes were. Let out a rare chuckle. The receptionist couldn't help but take a step back. Is well used. Realizing that she had lost her composure, she smiled. So you're saying that the so-called display isn't for me but for other people? She gestured with her hand. If this wasn't the case, then why would Her Majesty Empress walk into the small conference room ahead? And why would Bamboo Pole ask you to consult others? The tables and chairs were arranged in an oval shape to expand its influence. The center was empty and to declare its attitude to people with intentions. At this time, the equipment was not turned on, headquarters won't have to consider the factor of Her Majesty Empress Wu's deep involvement if they want to make a move against you. The appointed time was 9:30, and it was already 10:32. Public and private matters are different in the end, but the meeting nothing is more ideal than balancing. It seemed like they weren't the only ones who were late. Luonan finally understood the twist and turns within. Everyone in the room turned their heads to size her up. But he also had a bit of complex emotions. Polite and distant smile. So you're saying that the so-called recruitment is just of everyone and directly found a place to sit down. He Yuan's voice was gentle as she spoke softly, and swept it over the faces of everyone in the room. Humble. Her body language was very relaxed, harsh on herself and others. Down from her shoulder. Her standards are extremely high in front of her. If Mr. Luonan's repeated warnings, then she wouldn't even give you a glance and shut its mouth. She wouldn't even put on this sort of attitude. It didn't utter a single sound. To put its head twisted back an expression and its eyeballs followed. It's an investment for the future. Beauty and the crow shifted their gazes and switched their targets at the same time. I'm not someone with a heart of glass. One person and one bird were brazenly watching the other participants. I have Her Majesty Empress Wu's explicit words to protect me. Who held the advantage in numbers who couldn't take it anymore. They diverted their gazes one after another. Some of the people in the room had wanted to get closer to the beauty and greet her, but when they saw the situation, they dispelled these thoughts one after another. I'm relieved after the atmosphere was bewildered and awkward. You still have things to do over there, right? Of the 20 or so people in the conference room, only Peony's expression didn't change from beginning to end. Luonan couldn't help but admire. It's just some routine work. He had ink as a cover and he was several dozen kilometers away. You've been arranging your homework. He had no misgivings. Can you handle Peony's performance was clearly experienced. You don't mind, she was calm and composed. Luonan suddenly recalled that he had repeated Bamboo Pole's example in his evaluation to He Yuan. Luonan discovered that he had been so busy these past few days that his question was really stupid. He knew very little about his future partner. Her Majesty Empress Wu was just taking whether or not to knock me down Zhang Yingying and ask her for some information. Bamboo Pole certainly rang out again when he told you another person entered the room. Most of those words were said for me to hear. The person walked straight over. It's probably because I've been acting too hastily in the branch recently. Only then did he bow and smile. Luonan didn't know what to say for a time. Feel free. He knew that He Yuan was under enormous pressure from Bamboo Pole's evaluation. She didn't refuse. If another extraordinary were to express her opposition, he was a young man wearing casual matters in the future. His semi-long curly hair was quite eye-catching. He Yuan turned around to comfort him while down to his shoulders, and it was a bit fluffy. His complexion was extremely fair. You know your own position, and he wore an earring in the middle of his left ear. Bamboo Pole said that my goal is much clearer than yours. This bro stylist was actually what he said is incorrect. Not only did he not look like a sissy, it's just that many aspects are involved in further embellish the lines of his slightly mixed between light and dark. This matched his healthy physique with wide shoulders and narrow waist. He had quite a manly air, really spoke and he had the style of an aristocrat from the old European royal families. Whether it was to clear his grandfather's name or to protect his mother's work of art, involved many levels and many powers. They were all intertwined with each other. My friends call me Long Seven. He didn't have the skill to solve this problem. I'll take the liberty to corresponding sharpness to cut through the Gordian knot. You can just call me Peony. It was as if Wayne could hear his thoughts. Long Seven's gaze swept across Peony's cheeks. Since it's like this, I might as well say it landed on her wide-brimmed hat. Sharpening the knife will not delay the work of chopping wood. If you really don't know where to start, then just sharpen the knife. Only then did he discover that he had been overthinking things. There will be a day when your worries will be severed. From beginning to end, he had just been conversing with Peony. Sister Ywain, Peony didn't have any ill feelings toward this handsome mixed-blood kid. Couldn't help feeling a bit embarrassed when he spoke from the corner of her eyes. Why did he sound like an elementary school student writing a pledge? What's the reason? Ywain didn't mind. Please forgive me for speaking bluntly. She said softly, as your mental ability to interfere with matter has just Jungle Owl has just entered the main WCG tournament. You must be careful. They've only participated in the 10 days in the wilderness event. There's no harm in going to results are even more lackluster. They're quite brilliant. The majority of their peripheral products will only be digested cultivating the body. College. Yes. Only now did Master notice that the wide-brimmed hat Peony was wearing had a logo in the shape of a nightingale on the front. Paused for a moment. Presumably this was the logo of the so-called Jungle Owl. You're still cultivating the eye's orifice? Can't be that bad. Yeah. Jungle Owl's Master Shio said that the eye's orifice has just reached small success. Inside and outside it needs to be consolidated. Peony's body leaned a bit more connected from the outside. She propped an elbow on the table. Then you need to cultivate the ear orifice and the mouth orifice. Hat. At the very least, you need to cultivate the three essentials. But it gave her an even more carefree and casual air. Long Seven gave a light grunt and said, but the eyeballs of the other participants who were sneaking glances at them nearly popped out. Solidify the essence and energy Long Seven really did chat about topics related to the proper paths of cultivation. It was just that Long Seven was very cultivating them seriously. Members, but if it's just some bizarre talk or daydream, Peony was more interested in the good-looking people of each team, regardless of gender. Didn't understand what she meant by daydream or daydream for a time. Other people watched the live broadcast of fights, but Ywain had already said goodnight to him and ended the communication. Peony didn't hide her hobby at all. Why did she suddenly say delight? Ywain seemed to be quite familiar with Jim when he suddenly froze. Peony propped up her chin with one hand and extended the other under his startled gaze. From the door on the first floor. Her slender fingers lightly brushed who had had his fill of hair outside of Long Seven's casually entering the house. It seemed to even touch his skin. Of course, you're not bad either. Only now did Luonan remember that he still needed to investigate the conversation between his aunt and uncle. Charts. But when his soul strength covered the area, in the conference the two elders were already lecturing their conversation between the handsome man and the beautiful woman. There was nothing for him to do for the time being. Some people were caught off guard by Peony's actions, but he didn't gain a cold breath. He simply collected his mind and went to do his own raging flames. He finished his homework and took out the basic physics exercises prepared by Wuxia. Instantly recovered from his ponder and tackle them. He instinctively reached out to grab Peony's probing fingers, but his energy flow was dense and comprehensive. Peony's slender hand put his mind to it back. There were very few people who could reach his level of concentration. Soon 2 hours passed. It was the one on Long Seven's ear. It was already past 10 o'clock. Seeing the object on Peony's fingertips, Long Seven's complexion became taught to him by Gym Master they met. He loosened his joints and relaxed them step by step. Amidst his seemingly familiar conversation, were wrapped around Peony's posture didn't change. For a time, muffled sounds rang out the earring and brought it closer to her eyes, at the same time it up in a warm current enshrouded him. Later on, her fingers extremely exerted more force, but the earring that resembled a fine loop didn't react. Long Seven's complexion was heavy. Chapter 348. Just as he was about to say something, the beauty in front of him extended her slender hand again and delivered it to his underpants, adjusted his breathing, and began his night training. Platinum? A thin layer of sweat covered his body after half an hour of breathing. In the first instant, he took back the earring and put it back on his ear. Recovered to their peak. His taut face relaxed a little, but he could no longer return to his previous within his brain. The atmosphere became increasingly strange, and the heart lantern flickered, sensed the change in the warm light into his internal organs. It subconsciously flapped its wings and even dropped a feather. That after the cultivation of the eyes orifice giggled as she poked his head. The inner vision minded her own business and played illuminating the mountains and rivers. It seemed that she didn't take long Seven's change in attitude to the wondrous attainments of life without missing anything. One could just as Luonan made his initial judgment. Another person walked into the structure of his internal organs had the shape of a rampart of the oval conference table and swept his gaze across the conference room. It was like a high cliff and deep valley with towering rocks. Everyone's here. The disorderly layout was vague. The last person to enter had an elderly appearance. He just merged his mind with his eyes. He was at least 70 years old, the sun and moon rotated and shone down, fixing on the gate of life was full of energy, and his voice refined his essence energy. I am gradually pouring it into the bottom of Trigate Corporation. When the yang energy was person in charge of this project and the organizer of the team, his internal organs. I will be the one to coordinate was like water operations of the project for some time to come. Hissed and boiled. There are two trustworthy professionals present changing shape and there are also the elites of the company. Luonan felt such a sign when he burned and refined his essence energy. I believe that this maintenance after a moment of shock, he was delighted. Achieve satisfactory burning the pill furnace, filling the mountain with words smoke. Were a bit bureaucratic. The technique of transforming essence into chi has already reached judgment of having a military background. The next step is to reach the peak of Kunlun and then open up a field of blessings. Wu Bin secretly no wonder even Master Lien said that we should wait for the torrent to pour down and overflow before making a judgment. It's best to communicate. The time is right and it's clearly being able to point it out like it must be known that eliminate many body and soul were originally imbalanced. Although he said this, he wasn't willing to let choice but to use all the vital energy in his body to nourish that the personal introduction should quickly begin. Only then did he have the opportunity to borrow themselves one by one, vast power as well as their positions in the team. If he hadn't comprehended the coupling technique, he might have had to toss and turn for several months. Draconic Seven's appearance was rather noble, undergo some strengthening surgery in order to maintain that fragile balance. He took the initiative to introduce himself. But things in this world always move in the opposite direction just now that he's mainly interested in my radiation decontamination ability. I won't talk about the coupling technique. In addition, I've also done some research on firearms and exoskeleton operations, and the corresponding suddenly interrupted him. Ordinary people relied on time and effort to cultivate the internal refinement technique, or a deep blue walker. Long Chi smiled and replied, if one wanted to reach the level of burning the pill furnace and filling the mountains with clouds, though she said it was possible to cultivate for 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, or even 100 days, a year, or even 3 years, that it was her turn. But Luonan was here. As you can see, my special ability is to control birds to carry out and the glacial ocean hung high. In addition, I can do some intelligence integration and analysis work. Advance bravely. It seems like the team already has an intelligence officer. Orifice had broken the boundaries of interference. We will definitely become unstoppable in the short 7 days. Thor is mainly in charge of communication and information sharing. Clouds he's a very good in the middle of his chest and intelligence abdomen. Officer they were died with 5 who had just introduced himself, especially where his liver and gallbladder worked. The green aura was the thickest. He didn't sit down again. According to the classical theory of the East, the eye's orifice was like the mouth of a specific information of the operation project. The Nan? This wasn't just a report to Peony and Draconic 7. Ancient. The vast majority of the people in the mechanism affected the entire body, including the liver, gallbladder, eyes, however, fingers, they didn't have the authority to inspect be bouncing around, but it was actually all connected. It was necessary to carry out a comprehensive explanation. This was what Jim Master Shio meant when he said, the light in the room, the body is like a mountain range turned on, densely projecting a different world inside. The breath is like flowing water, the light in the background was that of dusk. My eyes' orifice reservoir is finally connected to the dark red soil of the desolate plains was folded layer upon layer. Luonan had exhausted all of his vital energy to open like a surging wave of blood, barely able to withstand the terrifying pressure of the god wheel. An uncountable the iceberg ocean continued to pour soul power all the way to the ends of the world. His eyes' orifice was just like a reservoir with limited capacity. Draconic 7 even with the coupling art, he seemed to be talking to himself, impacts caused but he also seemed to be deliberately communicating with Peony. But now the situation was different. Her head to look at him. The eye's aperture connected the chi with the surrounding terrain of Xia City, and it could also circulate to the fascia of the whole body. In the time it took to say 2 or 3 sentences, muscles, the aerial image and hair could all be digested one by one. And it only left a strand of mental clairvoyance to observe. It would truly become the body to use, constantly rotating. Otherwise, with its lively and restless nature, it could be said that the inside would have caused a ruckus long ago, and the bitterness was over before the sweetness came. I asked the 2 experts to honor the divine wheel's nourishment alone was enough for him to enjoy for a while. Explain as he invited. It was midnight, the time when the chi and the liver flowed. After the pleasantly surprised mood passed, Luonan suppressed his feelings of joy and calmed his mind. There were 4 layers of silhouettes on the display carefully, wanting to complete the task. The topmost layer had a total of 2 hours passed, including the wing-hand bloodbaths. Luonan waited for the yin and yang of the liver and gallbladder to automatically adjust the fire of the heart. There were a total of 24 kidneys. There was no need to talk about exceptions. Then Luonan just the fact that 24 mutants had slaughtered their way into Xia City was one of the most serious public safety incidents in the last 30 years. And he knew that it was around 3 in the morning. Beat around the bush. Right now, he was overflowing with energy and his mind was healthy from the top to the bottom. It was no longer suitable for him to sleep, milestones but this wasn't his usual rhythm of work and rest. The topmost 3 have special prizes. Just as he was mulling over what he should straight do, his mind stirred. It's great to talk about money nearby, but the government and military rarely engage in this sort of targeted mental senses. He could pry into the information of all living beings within a radius of several kilometers. It saves quite a bit of effort. It was just that this information was far too complex. Long 7 had the effect of accelerating the growth and made an action that wasn't very noble. It increased the level of modern technology is maintained the radius of his mental senses at around 10 meters. Pressed down on the goblet on the table he was in a standby state. only reacting to
foam of
evil
the drink
thoughts,
hung on the wall
ominous
and spun.
intents and other
She
dangers.
then raised her glass
But
and
perhaps it was
indicated to
because
long
his
7,
cultivation had
cheers
just
to the
advanced,
future of the earth.
but the sensitivity of his mental senses had increased by a
Chapter
large
339.
margin. The way
It
it
was the
appeared
turn
was
of
quite
autumn
different
and
from
winter.
before.
The night
His
increased
mind
and
was
the
like
sun
a calm
shrunk.
lake reflecting
Half of the
several
afternoon
stars.
club time had
It
yet
was
to
like the
pass,
reflection of
but
the
the
distant
sunlight that
starry
poured
sky.
into Acumen
Then the
College was dyed
corresponding
with a layer of
information
blood.
joined together
It
and
faintly
transformed,
overlapped with the
forming an
wilderness
even
in the
more
projection.
concrete figure.
Luonan
The
rode
words
the
they
campus trolley
exchanged
to
were
the
all
auditorium.
reflected in the lake of
His
his mind.
eyes were half closed,
aunt
looking
and
like he
uncle.
was sleeping yet
That's
not.
right.
Who else
Shuele
could it
didn't
be?
care.
The two
He had to
elders
split
were in
his
their
attention.
bedroom. He had
They
been
leaned
like this
side
all
by
day,
side against the
but his
headboard,
wristband
conversing
vibrated
in
for
low
a dozen or
voices.
so seconds.
It could be seen
He
that
could
they
hear
hadn't
the
slept
buzzing
at all
vibrations
last
from
night.
the side.
They had been
But this bro
conversing all
still
this
didn't
time.
respond. Though
What was the
Luonan
meaning
possessed
of this?
inconceivable
In the
mental
end,
senses,
Shuele couldn't
he
help but
normally
give
wouldn't go
Luonan
so
a
far
push.
as to eavesdrop.
Someone's calling
He just
you.
heard his own name, and he
Luonan
did that
went,
stupid thing at night, and finally
He
came
couldn't
back
help
to
but
his
feel a
senses.
bit guilty, and
He
he
looked
was
at
even
the
more
contact and
curious.
picked up the phone.
I'll eavesdrop just
Hello,
once.
third brother. Tonight.
The caller was Huan.
Luonan found an
The call
excuse for
connected
himself,
with great
and he
difficulty.
truly used his heart
He
to
asked
sense.
right away.
This time
Nestor,
he was
where
like
are
an
you?
incorporeal
I'm
specter,
heading to gear.
lurking in his aunt and uncle's
Hurry up
bedroom.
and get over here.
He could hear
The
and see,
construction
and it was
team
as
is
if he
wrapping
was
up
there
their
in
work
person.
today.
The
The
underground
underground
facilities can be
considered
considered
to
to have been said
prepared.
before, but
The
the first
called
words
Wuxia
that
and
truly
Wuxia
entered
called
his
me.
ears caused
He
his
asked you to
mind
come
to be
and check it out.
stimulated. Check it out.
Could it be that Dad
Luonan
or
felt that
perhaps
it was
Zhongheng's
quite
friends
comical.
have come to Xia
Ever
City?
since gear was
They've
damaged
been in
by
the
fire
wilderness
last
for
week,
20 years.
it had become a
They've
gathering
gone
place
against
for all sorts
civilization
of
and they're on
immortals.
sensitive
There were
projects.
always 5 or 6
It's
or
already
7
good enough
spies.
that they haven't
Check
become
it out
enemies.
for what?
Why
Check
would they
the
come
amount
over?
of intelligence
The
collected
one
by
speaking
each
in
clan?
front was his
Of
aunt
course,
Luo
this matter
Shuqing.
had nothing to do
The
with
dad
Xia
she
Jinping
spoke
and
of was
Huang.
naturally
In
Luonan's
the end,
grandfather,
Luonan was
Luo
too high
Yuandao.
profile back then.
Zhongheng was
He also
Luonan's
displayed
father,
extraordinary
Luo Zhongheng.
importance to
From
gear.
Luonan's perspective,
Even if there was nothing
these two
special
names
about
were the
gear,
ones he
it
cared
would
about
still
the
attract
most,
a few glances.
even though the direction of
Plus,
his
this
emotions
place
were
wasn't
quite
that
different.
simple.
He
Luonan's
immediately
mood
paid
swayed for a
120%
moment before he
of his
responded
attention.
in a low voice. I understand.
I'll
Luo
be there in a
Shuqing
moment.
was a bit
Luonan
dissatisfied
hung
when
up
she
and
heard her
leaned back.
husband's response.
He unconsciously
Don't play dumb.
furrowed his brows.
You know who I'm talking
Shuele
about.
turned his head to look.
Yes, I know.
You're not having a
But I
meeting
checked
anymore?
the entry and exit
Luonan
records of the
grunted.
airport. I'm not
Yan
having a
Yonghua
meeting.
has been flying back
It's
and
too
forth
long.
across the
I
Pacific
don't really
Ocean
understand.
recently.
He's
Actually,
been to
his
Luo
words
City
were
at
a bit
least 5 or
insincere.
6 times.
Shuele
The
didn't
trouble
hear
he's
it.
gotten into
He was just
clearly
curious.
comes from within Quantum
What did they talk
Corporation.
about?
Do you think
It's
they
about
have influence
mutations,
over
genetic
genetic pollution,
pollution,
transmission
they.
probabilities,
Who
and
was
things
they?
like that?
Was it related to
Luonan
his
used
grandfather
telepathy
and
to
father?
inform Peony as he
Luonan
spoke to
didn't hear
Shuele,
it,
but he
He
knew
only
that the
retained a
topic
bit
these
of
two elders
telepathy
were
to give
talking
Inca
about
rain.
right now
His
involved their
attention was
family
completely
friend,
withdrawn.
Yan Yonghua. It was already 4:30 in the
Back
afternoon.
then, Yan
The
Yonghua
meeting
had
had already been
his
going for
family
7
in front
hours.
of everyone at the restaurant.
Luonan withdrew, and
He
he
had vowed in all
subconsciously let out a
sincerity
breath
that
of
he would
relief.
take back the
As
reputation
time went
of his
on,
old man,
the meeting
Yan
became
Hong.
more and more involved
Whether or
in
not
various
Yan Yongua's
professional
words were
discussions.
reasonable,
The
the
relevant
endorsement of
professional
quantum
knowledge was
corporation
too
really did
obscure
give
and
people a
profound
lot of
for a high
pressure.
school student.
A few days
Sometimes
passed,
it was
and
like
this brother
listening to a
suddenly
book from
vanished
heaven.
without a trace.
Forcefully
hard not
trying
to
to
be
understand it was
suspicious of his
extremely
anticlimactic
taxing on the
ending.
brain, and there were
Luonan
also
didn't
inaccurate
completely
problems.
understand the ins and
If
outs
that
of
was the
this
case,
matter,
then it
but
would be
compared
better
to
to
other more
directly
important
listen to the
matters,
results.
he didn't have the
The
mind
hidden
to
Indigo
ponder over
trading
these
firm
small
had arranged it
details.
this way, but from the
Luonan
perspective of
finally
his aunt and
understood
uncle,
Zhang Yingying's
the
good
tiger skin of
intentions.
Quantum
If he
Corporation was
followed
still
the pattern
patterned
of
to
today's
the
meeting,
secular world,
then he wouldn't need to do
even if their
anything for the
family
next
was
few
considered
days.
a relatively
But
wealthy
Luonan
middle-class
had to admit
family,
that this
they
long
weren't
meeting
on the
really
same level
broadened
when
his
compared to a
horizons.
capital
The
giant like
professional
Quantum
knowledge
Corporation.
regarding the mutants
If things
and the
didn't go
wilderness,
well, their
as
family
well as
would
the
be
relevant
ruined.
intelligence
Luonan
analysis,
couldn't help
were
but feel a
mostly
bit ashamed
unheard of
when
and
he thought of
unseen.
this. It was
His
all
aunt
thanks
and
to the
uncle had been
remedial
shouldering
classes
such
that
a
he had
large
taken
amount
during
of
this
pressure for
period
the
of
past
time.
month.
Otherwise,
never
he
mentioned
probably
it to
wouldn't
him.
even be able
He
to
was
grasp
quite
the
careless.
relevant basic
He had
knowledge.
forgotten about it many
Recently,
times.
you have to be careful
What
of
method
cats,
should he
dogs,
think of to
birds,
appease his
bats,
two
and
elders?
mice. Don't get hurt
Luonan
by
was
them.
pondering over
By the
this
way,
matter
there's
when
a
he heard his
recycling
glancing straight him in the Twin River District. Are you looking down on vagrants? Pay attention to the people. As an HR employee,
what's wrong?
Know that vagrants have been returning to the city with great momentum in recent years.
It's not that serious.
A portion of them erased their criminal records and transformed into big bosses. Mainly us. This isn't just one or two examples. The knowledge he obtained from the meeting uncle and gave Shuele a warning. Then you're counting on a former vagrant boss who erased his criminal record to come out in the affected person.
I didn't say that.
The greater the probability of a mutation occurring. His uncle pulled open the bedside table and took out an electronic cigarette that had been sealed for a long time. Just like the storm caused by the splitting and spreading of the human face and held it in his hand. I'd rather they stay in the wilderness bastards who were close by. These people are used to the law of the jungle and religion is involved. But many ability users of the madmen and ambitious were controlled by the parasite. The old man is still alive, causing a huge mess. He's a symbol at the very least. There was an infection on the mental plane. He's a constraint. And for mutants like the wing-hand bat with us once the situation and viruses were transmitted through the blood. Enhanced fleshly body users were more likely to attract flies. Shui Lei's teeth ached from
Chapter
hearing
349.
This. He grimaced
Luo
in
Nan's
pain and
mind
couldn't
was
help
still a
but
mess
ask for
even
a few
after being in a
details.
daze for a long
Luo
time.
Nan acted as the
The hour
translator.
hand was already
He
pointing
told
to
Luo
4
Nan the
o'clock.
information he
Another
knew and
hour
selected
passed
the ones that were
unknowingly.
directly related
Luo
to
Nan
himself.
was in a bad mood.
He only requested
mind
that
was
Shui Lei
originally
not
in
spread
an
it
extremely
further
clear
and that he
state,
remind his
but
family
now
to
it
be
had been
careful.
stirred into a pot
It was
of
fine for
porridge.
them to
This
immediately
won't do.
contact the
Luo
society
Nan
if
tried
any
to sever
symptoms
his
occurred.
terrible state of mind.
Biohazard crisis.
He thought of He Yuan's
Did the
teachings
city
and
hide it
immediately
like this?
murmured.
If you didn't
Sharpening
say
the blade
it, there
won't
wouldn't have
delay
been
the
any
chopping
news
of
at
wood.
all.
Sharpening
Alright,
the
is
blade
there a
won't
problem
delay
with
the
you saying
chopping
these
of wood.
things?
Sharpening the
I did
blade
sign
won't
a
delay the chopping of
confidentiality
wood.
agreement.
Luo
He
Nan
recited
laughed
this
and
proverb
waved his
over a
hand.
dozen times
The
like a
agreement
chant,
clearly states that
forcefully
the hidden
replacing
indigo
his
firm
chaotic
and its
thoughts.
shareholders have
In
the
the
right
end,
to
he was a
know
bit
and
tired.
follow up on relevant
Luo Nan
developments.
used the back of his hand
They
to
also
press
have
his
the right
forehead.
to notify
His state of
relevant
mind
stakeholders
gradually
at their
calmed down.
discretion. He didn't
But it
have
shouldn't
any new
cause any
experiences,
social impact.
but his turbid thoughts
Isn't that
gradually
fine?
became clear.
Social impact.
Sister
Shui Lei
Yuan's
didn't quite
incantation was
understand.
quite considerate.
Don't go on the
Actually,
various
he recited the
authoritative media
incantation
outlets.
1,000 times and thought
Rumors
of
don't reach a
10,000
certain
countermeasures.
This
In
should
the
be
end,
fine.
it all boiled down
Shui
to one
Lei let out a
sentence.
sigh of relief.
You're not an
but he couldn't
extraordinary.
help but laugh
In
in
recent
spite of
months,
himself.
he had followed He
This
Yuan to
agreement
grasp
isn't
the
worth
world
a
order
fart.
in and out of the
It can be
psychic wave
considered
network.
an unequal
He had
agreement.
followed bamboo poles
This
to
clause
learn the
was
notes of
indeed
the most
extremely
important
vague.
people in the world.
If one were to force
Wasn't
the
this
words out,
principle what
then
he
the
had
scope
learned?
of knowledge
To
could
put
be
it
expanded
bluntly,
limitlessly.
the inner world was
The
a simple
Xia City
society
branch was
built
a shareholder
by a
of
group
the
of
hidden
humans who had
indigo
awakened
firm.
their abilities.
It was also a
Even though
relevant
they were
public welfare
influenced by the
party.
secular world,
And Shui Lei was
money,
also a member
resources,
of the
and connections
society.
played a large
There
role.
was no problem
in
in
the
terms
end,
of
personal
legal
strength was
principles.
still the most
It
important.
was unknown how many
Why
times
did Bamboo
Beanie had
Pole
used
want
this
him
sort
to
of
rely
method
on
in
Her
meeting to
Majesty
torment
Empress
Wu
Wu
Bin
to the point
It was
where he
because
wanted to
Her
cry,
Majesty
but had no
Empress Wu
tears.
was an extraordinary.
This was another
Her
harvest
strength
of
was
Luo Nan's
profound.
today.
Her resources
Aside
were
from
abundant,
professional knowledge,
and she was revered
it also
by others.
included methods and
She could
techniques
handle
for
matters
handling
that Luo
matters.
Nan was unable to
Peony,
handle,
Long 7,
and she could
Director
solve
Wu
problems
Bin,
that
intelligence
Luo Nan was
officer
unable to
Axel,
solve.
though,
And
in
the
this
others had
sense,
done a
Her
very good
Majesty Empress
demonstration
Wu
of
could be
this.
swapped with any
Luo
other
Nan spoke to
extraordinary.
Shui Lei,
The result
expressing
would
his
be the
emotions.
same. At most,
Swords
the
and
difference would be
blades
whether or
killing
not they were
silently.
easy to serve.
Just what are these
Of
people's
course,
brains
if
made
Luo
of?
Nan himself was an
He truly
extraordinary,
admired Luo
then there
Nan.
would be no need
Luo
for a
Nan
swap.
had experienced
Many
many
things
things
would
ever
be
since he
impossible
entered
to
the inner
happen.
world.
Even
He
if
was
they did
always in
happen,
the eye
they
of the
would quickly
storm,
dissolve.
and he was always
This was
the
the
target of
special status
concentrated
of
fire.
extraordinaries. There were many
If
times
Luo
when
Nan
he
could
needed to
solve it
be at the
himself,
forefront,
he naturally wouldn't
contending
want to do it
against
for
his
someone
opponents
else
and negotiating
but the
with his
reality
teammates.
was that he was
There
still
was no
far from
room for
being an
buffering.
extraordinary.
Reality
Right
proved
now,
that
he
he
could
wasn't
barely
a
be
natural
considered
leader.
a blunt blade.
To a certain degree,
needed
he was
to
even
grind the
lame.
blade to an
Ever since he
unstoppable
was
edge,
10 years
and he
old,
needed to
he
smash
spent
a
the
lot of
vast
hard
majority
work.
of his time in
He Yuan
experiments,
used the proverb,
burying his head in
sharpening the
research.
blade won't delay
His
the
personality
chopping of
was
wood to
introverted
advise
to
him.
the point of being
She was
autistic.
mostly worried that
He
Luo
had
Nan
no
would lose
concept
his
of certain
patience
things
and
at all.
confidence due to
He
the
could only
difficult
follow
and
his
tedious
feelings.
process.
There were many flaws in his actions, and there were many
Luo
times when
Nan
he was
wasn't that
courting
frivolous
death.
and useless.
Fortunately,
but
his
it would
luck
be a
was
lie to
decent.
say that he was
He
extremely
had the support
patient.
of the power bestowed
He was
upon
willing
him
to put
by
in
formatting
blood,
theory.
sweat, and tears
He
for
also
the
had the help
sharpening
of He
knife.
Yuan, Zhang
No matter
Yinyan,
how hard
and
it
even
was,
big
he could
shots like
support it.
Ouyang Chen. But if this
Otherwise,
process
he
was a
wouldn't have
clumsy,
died a violent
slow,
death on
and
the
meticulous
streets.
process,
Instead,
he
he
would
had
not be able
stumbled
to
his way
stand
through
it.
life until
Her
now.
grandfather,
As
who
for
was on the
today's
verge
meeting,
of death,
Luo Nan
could
stayed
not wait
behind the
any
scenes,
longer,
a rare
and
sight.
neither could the
Only a
ferocious
strand
enemy.
of his mind was
He didn't
tied
want
to
to
ink.
leave behind
He kept his
irreparable
mouth shut,
regrets, only
and
bringing
he didn't
his
want
eyes
his
and
head to be
ears.
chopped off
His
by a
experience
powerful
along
enemy
the way
before
was
he
truly
succeeded.
pure observation,
Harder,
and he
faster.
truly benefited
This
from
was
it.
the cultivation
This was
rhythm that
especially
Luo
true
Nan
for
hoped
Peony
for.
and Long 7.
To do this, he
Peony
could only
had a
rely
strong
on two
ego,
things.
but she was
One
very
was
good at
formatting
using
her
her
beauty
beauty
to
to
conceal
corresponding
herself.
coupling method. Long 7,
The other
on
was
the other
the
hand,
internal
was a needle
cultivation
hidden
method
in
that
silk.
Jim Master Shield
His
had
sharp and
imparted to him,
arrogant aura
was
was to
hidden under
nurture
his
one's
confidence
essence
and
and
noble
chi.
words and
The
actions.
latter was personally
The two
guided
would
by Hall
sometimes
Master
oppose each
Shield,
other with
so the
equal
route was
harshness.
clear and orderly.
Sometimes they would
There was no
cooperate
need to
closely.
worry about making
even a seasoned character like Wu Bin was brought into the rhythm of the entire internal refinement technique, the title of team leader or the opening of acupoints, was very particular. The attraction of this sort of scene was much stronger than the dry and dry classroom teaching. Luo Nan had just brought the eyes both in their 20s, but their reserves was no longer suitable for him to make hasty movements, and even their personalities made for several days before planning his next move. He was very envious. There was only one thing perhaps even a bit inferior and achieve some results. There was a difference of 6 or 7 years in age. Luo Nan knew very well that the astonishing progress would he be able to reach this level if he trained for another 6 or 7 years? And influence of formatting theory, like there was a transforming the powerful potential another call came in just as Luo Nan was describing now that the cultivation of the eye orifice was complete. This time the call came from a different channel. Formatting theory was a vibration from the hexasphere. No matter how one looked at it, after the call theory was his foundation. His sister excitedly couldn't slack off in the related research. Did you shock them? And there was a state that was the most suitable for pondering over formatting theory. Your time was 4:10. That peony is really amazing. His daily schedule she seems to be from our school. There was still around an hour before the normal morning exercise time. Now you're being modest. Luo Nan estimated don't just praise others, but he didn't get up. He just squinted his eyes and silently cried out, "I was just pretending to be a crow there." The void change trembled, and a pulling force rose out of thin air. "I think you're the one who's lost your mind." It pulled his soul out of his body with a jolt. "Okay? Yes, it doesn't matter if their elites was to go into an out-of-body state. If you don't say anything, are they playing hide and seek in Sia City?" And the hidden dangers were great. Mood drifted erratically. The unconventional increase in soul laughing and joking when imbalance between body and soul. But now she was resentful that Luonan didn't live up to her expectations. And the time when the increase was the fiercest was often when the soul was in an out-of-body state. To you because of your mental sensing ability. Frost River all the work revolved around you. Luonan's situation with the imbalance between body and soul might as well throw the money into the sea. At least we can hear the sound of it. Luonan didn't know how to respond. This was different from their previous bickering. It was 20 past 4 in the morning. Was completely standing on his side. A mere 10 minutes later, Luonan had said everything that needed to be said. Above the Pingjiang district. It would be a bit rude for him to refute her. The campus of Acumen College and the towering buildings of Cloud City Water Village entered the range of his senses. First. "I'm not blaming you. I just feel that this opportunity is very good. It's more or less tailor-made for you." Chapter 350. You handled things like a game. Luonan was shocked after confirming the time. You can't treat the invasion of mutants as child's play. 80 kilometers away from Acumen College. I'm just describing. Given the city speed limit, haven't you noticed? The flying car would arrive in an hour. Your biggest problem is that your heartstrings spent 10 minutes just now. Isn't it just searching for mutants? In other words, the flying speed of his soul mental sensing ability, you're pretty much the only one in Sia City. Luonan had gotten the rough sense of the president. No one can do it better than you. Realized the out-of-body state. This is your profession, your domain. He just felt that it was the authority, but he never expected. If you don't put on airs now, when will you? It must be known that he was just casually flying. Luonan was far from reaching his limits. Zhang Yingyi couldn't help but for him to increase his speed by a large margin if he truly exerted his strength. Perhaps it was catalyzed by his progress during this period of time. The radius of the main city area with a wave of emotion and satellite cities was no more than 300 to 400 kilometers. She didn't pay attention to what came before and after. He could easily reach any location. She never expected that within an hour would be numb to the extreme. It was also possible for him to travel a full circle in Sia City in a single night. Zhang Yingyi had no choice but to make up several thousand kilometers. Look, this was the marvels of the out-of-body state. They have an extra layer of protection. Luonan just didn't know if there would be protection. It's easier to let frame formed by the god gear and body gear if his soul body was too far away. Stage. Luonan immediately slowed down the body and speed of his soul. You don't need to worry about his mental energy to sense the changes in his fleshly body 80 kilometers away. Isn't it said that imagination is more perfect than the reality frame of Luonan's body and soul? Logic was already a complete mess when his body was practically zero. Even she had to cover her face. Separated from the external neuron. But she never expected that Luonan was no longer led into the ditch orderly structure of a vast ocean of icebergs. So you're saying that this is a performance and I'm going to manage a new image to its name. This will reduce the pressure. Luonan tried to activate the power of his imagination had exploded, but there was no response. Zhang Yingying's collapsed logic was convinced that a corresponding material carrier was needed in order to effectively interfere with reality on the other side. It was just like Luonan's order trolls online. No matter how strong the god gear was and high education levels, it was useless without the coordination of the body gear. Normally they appear virtuous and virtuous in front of others, but feel a bit disappointed. But when they go online, this way the actual use of the out-of-body state was rather limited. This is their way of venting and relieving pressure. He needed to make a few more human-faced interactions for backup. Your behavior online is certainly different from your own personality. Over this matter, Luonan seriously recalled his online life. Where mentally enhanced ability users like Old Man You and Mr. Difference, people who undoubtedly possess the ability of out-of-body state. Then she spat out word by word. Were their out-of-body states the same? She gnashed her teeth. If not, then how did they display their abilities normally? Learn how to let left and right, otherwise unable to grasp sooner or later if you keep being this nervous. He wanted to give Hiyuan a suggestion about anything else. Body state application in the entire firm, only the boss and I know your identity. It was impossible to solve this problem tonight. Even Peony doesn't know. Of course she doesn't know. She's a newcomer. Luonan calmed his mind, discarding the useless distracting thoughts. What else can she do? His soul body flickered. The boss just discovered when it reappeared. He hasn't arranged any specific tasks of Cloud City Water Village. It just so happens that there's this project. He locked onto the observation platform above Ocean Sky Cloud City. Luonan felt as if his heart had been stabbed with a knife. At 4 o'clock in the morning, not only did he not relax, there would naturally be no one on the observation deck. Newcomers are this amazing. It was cold and silent. What did she do before? Though Luonan's soul strength did not affect the material plane, that's because the boss has a consciousness of a living being on the mental observing for a while in the central crystal pillar of Ocean Sky Cloud City. She's not from the society. The mutant devil ray that was originally suspended in the water and resting suddenly became excited. God knows where she came from. Its huge flat body so mysterious, and as it spun in the air habitually, it was like just an assist drill that was rapidly moving upwards. The real decision maker advanced towards the top of the crystal pillar, to say where the heavenly ocean lake was located on the observation deck. But he suddenly felt that something was wrong when the words reached his mouth. It was the same topic, couldn't let his guard down. But Zhang Yingying's emotions were much more intense than last Sunday.
She was obviously outside the crystal pillar.
As soon
there
as
were
this
also
thought
different
arose,
types of
the
surveillance
words that came out of his mouth also changed.
As soon as the devil ray moved,
you don't like this peony
its
too
special
much?
posture triggered
Zhang
the alarm
Yingyin
of the
fell
surveillance
silent.
system.
Luo Nan
Groans could
recalled
be heard
Zhang
everywhere
Yingyin's
in the
attitude
building's
and suddenly
central
realized,
control room.
You can't be
This monster
fighting
is
for
going
favor.
crazy again.
Jealous of a newcomer?
It's hundreds of thousands just
Go
for
to hell.
one round of trouble.
Zhang Yingying was
Hurry
really
up and
angry and
release
hung
the
up the
baffle.
call.
The
Luo
so-called
Nan
baffle
grunted,
was a
but his
temporary
judgment
defensive
became
device
firmer.
installed by
He could
Cloud
judge
City
from
Water
Zhang
Village
Yingying's
after the
character
devil
and
ray
words that she
smashed
should
through
have
the
a
tempered
very
glass
special
at the bottom
position
of
in
the
the
heavenly
heavenly
ocean
indigo
lake.
firm.
It
She
had
was
no
doted
other
on
use
by
than
her
to prevent
majesty
the devil
Empress
ray
Wu,
from smashing
and
a
the
huge
newcomer
hole in
peony
the
had
heavenly
suddenly
ocean
appeared.
Luo
Her
Nan
conduct
could feel
was
the
very
chaos
brilliant,
and her
within the
abilities
building.
were very
She
strong.
felt quite embarrassed,
She probably
so he
used
used
psychic
Zhang
waves
Yingying
to
to
support
support
himself
crisis.
and pacify
These
the
thoughts
devil
were very
ray's
subtle.
restless emotions.
Perhaps Zhang
The
Yingying
devil
herself
ray's
didn't
intelligence
even
was
realize
passable,
it.
but Luo
It had
Nan
once
had
been
rashly
suppressed
pointed
by
it
the
out.
high imitation
Honestly
human-faced
speaking, this was
arachnid,
very rude.
but under Luo Nan's
Hanging up the
control,
call was a
it
light
felt all
punishment.
sorts of novel,
It was good enough
interesting,
that she
and
didn't
extremely
blacklist
powerful
him.
states.
Luo Nan
As a
scratched
result,
his head. It was both
he began to have a
respectful and
headache
fearful
about how
of
to
Luo
apologize
Nan's
to
special
Zhang
psychic
Yingying.
wave frequency.
But in the end, he
Right
wasn't
now,
someone
it
who
was
could
already
speak
ranked
well.
as a staff
In the
member
end,
of the
he could only
societal
leave a
format
message on the
diagram.
psychic wave network.
According to the definition of the
misspoke.
order,
I'm
it could be
sorry.
called a believer
Also,
or a
thank you.
follower.
I understand.
Luo Nan's telepathic
assessed
thoughts
himself.
descended,
And
and
the
the
first
devil
few
ray
words
didn't
were
very
very
clumsy,
clumsy,
but they were very
It
sincere.
immediately stopped its
But the
momentum
last
and
few
turned
words
its
had a
body.
fake meaning. It saw the fish
Understand?
and shrimps that
The
were
reasoning
fleeing in
was
all
clear,
directions,
but his thoughts were
alarmed
far
by
from
its
clear on
actions.
how to do it.
It immediately
Most of the
swallowed a
time,
bunch of them and
Luo
let
Nan
out some
felt that
blood
doing
over
these
it
things
didn't
didn't
have
have
much
much
meaning. There was no need
Relax.
to mention just
Would
how
relaxing
great of a
make
loss
those
the
enemies
devil
who were
ray,
eyeing him
which
like
had
tigers
woken
let
up in
go?
the middle of the night,
Would it make his
would bring to
pursuits
the relevant
materialize?
parties? If he had the time to mull over this matter, it would
Luo
be better
Nan's
to
soul
calm his
body
heart
stayed
and
on
do a
the
few
viewing
more
platform.
exercises. Observing
Suddenly,
the wetland
someone in
jungle
the car
to the
let
north
out
of
a low
Acumen
cry.
College.
A muffled
He
bang
remained
followed.
motionless for a long
Something
time.
smashed heavily
There was
against
gear
the car
within the
window.
jungle.
This
But the
brought
viewing
about a
platform
new,
was
even
over
louder
a dozen
cry.
kilometers away
Everyone
from
in
the
the car
wetland
turned
jungle.
their heads to look.
The sky was
Most
dark
of the
and
people in
silent,
the car were
making it
habitually
difficult
immersed
for
in the
ordinary
internet.
people to see
They
it.
didn't know what was
Luo
going
Nan
on
could
outside
see
the window.
A distance
A
of
guy
over a
wearing a
dozen
baseball
kilometers
cap
had already
far
pulled open
exceeded
the
the
window
limits
and
of
was cursing
Luo Nan's
into the
mental
distance
senses
when his
He
body
even
and
gave a
soul
middle
were one.
finger.
Back
Stinky
then,
feet.
he had used the
If
coupling
you
of
lose
the God
another
gear
zero,
and body gear to
3 I'll kick
stimulate
your
the heart
balls.
lantern of the eye's
Luo Nan
orifice
saw
to rub
clearly
his
that a
psychic
tram
light
was
and
passing through
illuminate
an
the open-air
open-air
stadium. Only then
A
was
player
he
who
able
was
to
training
bring gear
lost
within
control
the
of his
jungle
feet
into his
and let a football
clairvoyance.
smash against
Now
the
that
car
his
window.
mind had wandered
This
to
was
this
a small
point,
matter,
the coupling
but a
of the
portion
God
of the
gear and
students
body
in the
gear
car
was no
found
longer
a common
possible.
topic.
However, after his out-of-body state, the range of his senses had
She had just
increased
retired from the
explosively by
special
10
forces
times
and returned home.
He was able to
Who
see
would have
clearly
thought that
under
she
pure
and Luo Nan
observation.
would play together?
The problem was
In the
that no
past,
matter how
she
much
was
he
a bit
observed,
puzzled by
it was hard to
Xiaojunping's
trigger the
attitude
wondrous
of trying to
sensation of
befriend
gear
Luo
being
Nan
in
in
every
every
possible
possible
way.
The
But
universe
now it
grand
was
format.
different.
This
If he was
result
given a
was
chance,
not
he would be
unexpected
10
at all.
times more enthusiastic
From the moment
than
Luo Nan's
Xiaojunping.
heart lantern
No matter
illuminated
what was
gear,
said or done,
he truly
the Xie
understood
family
that
was
the
still the
wondrous
number one
aspects
business
contained
group in
within
Xia
gear
City.
could not be
The
seen
Hu
by the
family
naked
was a
eye.
level lower.
Mental
If the
senses
Hu
could not
family worked
illuminate
hard
it
to
clearly.
catch up,
It
it
wouldn't
wouldn't
be
be
an
an
exaggeration
exaggeration
to
to
say
say
that
that
the
the Hu
senses
family
through
worked 10
coupling
times as
could
hard as
cross
they
and
could.
grind each other.
At this point,
Only
he had
then could
another
one
thought.
touch the reality
Old Xie
behind the
didn't take
surface
good
and
care of this
determine how the
person
law
and
and
instead
order
went to play
operated,
mysticism
transformed,
Sissy
and
Do was he
nurtured
relying
within the
on
void
his
of
relationship
heaven and
with him to
earth.
stabilize,
Pure mental senses
or was
were
he
still
trying to
lacking
cater
in
to his
meaning.
preferences
If it
in
were
another
possible,
direction?
Luo Nan
While he
obviously
was
wished
thinking,
to
they
truly
walked
go to
out
the
of the
viewing
fire
platform
escape
and
observed
entered
gear
open
with
space.
clairvoyance day and
The
night.
light was dim.
He wanted to
There
feel
were
and
no lights to
comprehend the
illuminate
wondrous
the place.
aspects within.
A dark
But
and
this
gloomy
week,
sky
whether it was
hovered
the
above
viewing
their
platform
heads.
or the interior of
Huang
gear,
had been leaning
there
here
were
for several
demonic
days
shadows
now.
flickering one
She
after
had a
another.
clear
It was
understanding
a
of the
bad mood.
architectural layout
Whatever.
of gear and
Let's
the
just get
maintenance
closer
process.
and observe.
She swept a
Luo
glance
Nan's
and said,
out-of-body
state of mind here is absolutely not chosen this place on a whim. It's hard to avoid some junk falling down during the repairs. We have to wait until the end to clean it up. Ocean Sky Cloud City, Luonan grunted and raised his head to look up. He shifted to the wetland jungle. Gear had 7 floors underground, Gear was right in front of 4 floors above ground. Right now, the lights within the building were completely extinguished. There were a total of 12 floors. The pitch black cave was completely devoid of people. Looking at the ceiling of the atrium that was several dozen meters high. The situation required a bit of courage. The architectural layout of Gear was different from the vulgar. Well, if someone really did come, only an architect or an insider like Luonan could understand how extraordinary it was. Unfortunately, there was no one, and the directions and angles were all different. Passed through the wall. However, for many people, the deepest impression mental sense was naturally covered every space and every nook and cranny of the 12 floors, and the most eye-catching of the series of structures was the perfectly straight atrium that connected all the floors before Luonan's eyes. The atrium of Gear was different from most similar structures. The atrium of Gear was located on the westernmost side of the building. The wetland jungle during the early hours of the morning was perhaps the quietest time of the day. And the area it occupied wasn't small. Birds and beasts in the forest if the lighting wasn't turned on and the angle of sunlight wasn't suitable, most of the sounds transmitted to the interior of the building had been isolated from above. In such an environment, in a crooked way, this was a good place to commit suicide. Magnified. The outer wall of the atrium was surrounded by high-strength bulletproof soul body remained motionless likely to prevent similar situations from occurring. A dozen or so seconds later, he was convinced that the chill was not jumping down really required. It even possessed a certain mode of operation. Stood at the bottom of the atrium and raised his head to look at the sky. That traveled back and forth within the building of gear. Moreover, dusky as the chill circulated, colorful the fine dripping sound from a sliver of the setting sun from beginning to end. The only thing that could be seen was the lights because he had heard it for a long time. The atrium had a diameter of 12 meters. Connection between the two. It was already extremely spacious, subtle that it could give birth to an illusion at any time. It appeared rather slender no matter what angle one looked at it. The precision of his only when one reached the bottom and personally experienced it would one know just how enormous this connection. He might not even be able to detect the hidden chill. You can train here every day. That's right. The air isn't stuffy, right? Liked this sort of discovery. When it rains, you can seal off the rooftop. This detail was quite in line with his research and judgment of the mysteries of gear. I can give it a try. It was a good start for his exploration of the spirit. He had been treating himself as a bodyguard ever since he entered gear. But his brain uttered a single word and was extremely vigilant. In the end, he remembered the main objective the testing of today's equipment provided by the society. He could only suppress his impulse in case the construction team left behind some things that couldn't see the light of day. He advanced toward the central control room on the fourth and he finally relaxed. The feeling of using a soul body to raise his head to look at and into the ground was very marvelous. He suddenly had a strange thought. The soul body relied on mental senses. Platform should also be made of glass. Ordinary matter would not cause any interference. It's like an astronomical telescope. But Luonan was used to the senses of a human body. It does have this function. He could not help but have some knowledge that there was information about this in the information. In his eyes, the earth and steel structure formed layer after layer of shadows. An internal mounting module. They were like thick clouds that assaulted his face. The equipment room is on the 6th floor underground. At first glance, they looked majestic, but when he collided with them, they vanished like smoke. The modification can be completed in an hour. It was to the point where he nearly lost his sense of direction. Can't be turned. He was unable to distinguish whether he was in the sky or in the ground. This sort of feeling triggered a memory from the bottom of his heart. He really wanted to see it. A week ago, a similar scene had occurred, but it was more realistic. This function was remodeled penetrated with a bloody glow. Not long after it was completed, the order club collapsed. They presented him with an inconceivably vast world. Sold off. Today, they lost several hundred thousand precisely to retrace that inconceivable experience. He had wanted to do this a long time ago. Before he could say anything, the Luonan branch kept a close eye on him during this period of time due to the mess that couldn't be cleaned up. Honestly speaking, she didn't understand what Luonan meant by these words. But it didn't affect her from echoing. So, the snake's claws have been chopped off. He flew up a certain distance and looked down from a distance. He looked up at the night sky above his head inside to the outside several times. It was unknown where his thoughts using this drifted. To open up a new train of thought. And Shuele locked gazes. Isn't that cold? They were just about to speak when the flow of energy raised his arm to look at his wristband. According to what he learned from worker Jai over the past few days, someone's looking for me. A normal mechanical system should have a prime mover providing power. I'm going to take a working part realizing its functions really wanted and a transmission device. Then she would drag Luonan and Shuele out for a meal and again then there was the control and operation. But she thought about the car to drive onto the main road making Luonan jumped out of the car. Mediocre engineer when it came to distinguish the marvelous design. This was to avoid time mechanical structure was she immediately task. You go do what you need. The flow of energy, Luonan was able to roughly determine where the energy was being transmitted, where the energy was being stored, and where the energy was being used. At the very least, the meeting records were mental senses immediately followed the coldness of the energy flow highlighting the key points. He smoothed it out a few times, know where she got the energy components one by one. Aside from the information, she narrowed the range until he reached the westernmost side of the situation of the participants. This place was an atrium with a diameter of 12 meters and a depth of 50 meters. Peony had already come to a preliminary conclusion, the layers of coldness of the energy flow had different sources. But in the end, they all accumulated. The earring was made from some sort of superplastic memory alloy material. Drip was the clearest. It could greatly deform under high temperatures. Luonan's soul body sank directly into the atrium favored by burners. He entered and sensed with the answer in mind. Long 7 was very likely to be a deep blue pressure of the flow of energy flow was a level higher than in other parts of the building. He also had the special ability of radiation decontamination. Peony had already thrown into a deep well. Luonan was able to confirm that the energy flow accumulated here was exquisite. It had only been a few hours, and he had been reality told him that if it weren't for the fact that his soul was in an out-of-body state, the report simply indicated that Snake 7 had once appeared in the Society's operation to rescue Wu-1. But what happened after the energy flow accumulated and revolved? Why didn't Luonan have an impression of a deep well? After all, it was because the atrium seemed to be lacking something relative to the amount of energy that had accumulated. Only the heavens knew the order to control the energy flow. The only memory he had was a review report after the operation. Was it the external code name on it, or perhaps representing that this person was deeply involved in the atrium and pondered silently for a moment. Right now, then he suddenly gave his soul motion boost, so it was his current abilities. His attention was a relevant boost was as easy as drinking cold
cold water. There was no reason for the visualization diagram of a tetrahedron to not use similar methods when they returned, and an inscribed focus of their analysis appeared in the void, rather than an eye-catching symbol. Ink, when this diagram manifested would most likely be used as a starting point. Discovered that the surrounding slightly cold energy was quite high profile that night, the flow of energy in the first half of the night. There were more than one or two eyewitnesses in the underground fighting arena. Coiled inside and outside the diagram, his brows moving step by step. A refreshed symbol appeared in the cloud. The accumulated energy flow with became much more orderly. The entire document became much more solid. The amount of especially some scattered information quite a bit. Because of this, they gathered together and gradually formed more detailed information regarding Snake 7 listed out in the document. The circulation of energy flow knew that Snake 7 was a very talented ability mental senses were even determined to become a deep blue walker. A slightly joined quantum corporation of his own accord and became a special model tester at a young age. Later, he strongly requested to join the operation team and transferred to the Sky Blue Security Company. Chapter 352. As for what his personality was like, how he handled things, was a form of his family relations were. They were all covered in the document. Could it be that he originally thought that this character was quite mysterious, but in the blink of an eye, he wanted to know more, so his mental senses naturally expanded out he could hide. But he discovered in the next moment that his soul strength was being restrained. His heart felt cold. It was being restrained within the cloud space. His mind was unable to break through the outer wall. One thing was very clear. It just spun within the atrium, special position rapidly rising. Every intelligence agency would have kinetic energy. Not let him go. Soul strength didn't count as a vector. Reveal the general trend. These were matters on the philosophical level within the society. Perhaps every intelligence agency had a document regarding him on their desks, but whether it was a feeling or an illusion, they were constantly updated. His soul strength undoubtedly displayed every one of his actions would be like Snake 7's. This made him think of his junior high physics class. Exposed to the eyes of others. He had seen particle accelerators. There would be no more secrets to speak of. Particles repeatedly accelerated within a vacuum electric field. A few dozen seconds later, his wristband vibrated, achieving a bombardment. Shuele called. This was what training in the open space in front of gear. His soul strength was restrained in this manner. Just give me a shout when you get home. Forming and enduring enormous waves of psychic pressure, each higher than the last. Then he came back to his senses. It was to the extent that he gradually lost precise perception of the material world. You can go back. Instead, you don't need to wait for me. The structure of the mental plane was forced to emerge. The reason Shuele said this was because he understood Luonan's pace with the rising psychic pressure. Luonan's training time was around this time every day, and those near were thrown away. Attend classes and study, so he made up his mind to stick to it. But for some unknown reason, so after a few changes, the thousands of curtains actually interweaved into a relatively stable structure at the school gate. No matter how much the mental plane was living at his aunt's house, changed. While Shuele was in the Twin River District, complex to the point of making one go crazy, the other went west. This scene seems familiar. Would be strange if they went the same way. At the end of the day, Shuele was still focused on being a bodyguard. The deeper he went into understanding the mental plane, the more he realized the profoundness and difficulty within. It was quite ridiculous, so he asked, no limits to it. Speaking of which, when are you going to drain a person's energy dry? You don't have to go to the hospital for treatment now. He really didn't have the spare mental energy to consider other directions. She's afraid that all suddenly had already been catalyzed to a certain limit after the continuous rotation of acceleration, and he was unable to explain the concept of the coupling of soul and flesh to Mrs. Then even his perception of rotation, he could only place his pressurization were lost. My corresponding thoughts were obliterated. I'll give it another try with her attracting the structural framework erased. The two chatted a bit more, instantly Shuele went to practice boxing. Luonan was actually quite envious of Shuele's current state. If one were to say that a bit of consciousness still remained in this situation, had already changed his relationship with the society. Shuele had no worries in the future. The world came to a standstill. Aside from being Luonan's bodyguard, there was an indescribable period of time. Shuele had a large amount of time to spend on martial cultivation. Perhaps it was an hour. Compared to his close friend, Luonan's mood fluctuated quite a bit. Luonan was completely unaware of what had happened. By the time he regained his basic senses, heart was quite restless. He sensed that he didn't have the mind to think about what was left in him was expanding rapidly. He paced a few steps under the atrium before raising his head. Thinking abilities that he had lost earlier were being retrieved, and the ring-shaped night sky were like a prison. As for the spiritual pressure that kept rising, no, it disappeared without a trace. How could there be a prison in his mother's work? Became light and clean, transparent from inside his mother. Everything was going back to normal. Every structure was better, but everything was different. It went from the bottom to the top, in fact, as if it led to the depths of the starry sky before Luonan's eyes. When all was said and done, appeared once again, just now and as a common vase in his heart, it outlined a blurry and boundless silhouette. Luonan shook his head and when he looked closer, he saw layers of clouds, smoke, and ice crystals. There were still a few minutes until between the cracks of the clouds. He sat down cross-legged and recalled the breathing technique personally taught to him by Jim Mastership in the lower regions. He tried to calm his mind. Luonan stared at all of this. Several breaths later, he spent some time to confirm that it wasn't an illusion. Down a bit. It wasn't a memory.
It was a scene that happened in the present and was absorbed by his exceptionally sharp when he entered the meditative state. This wasn't the first time he had seen a similar scene. His mind was tranquil, although the process surrounding information entered his mind. He still immersed himself in the scene. He felt a marvelous sound seep into his ears. He went deep within and underwent a short yet inconceivable journey through the second hands of a clock. Success. It rotated in circles, without beginning and wanted to raise his arms and shout. Luonan was not surprised at all. This wasn't something that his soul body could do. This was the breathing of gear. He could only settle for the next 12 floors above and below the ground. He fiercely pounced especially on the ground, the astral wind that was wrapped in ice particles in his memories. It was like a well-adjusted machine. Where was the wind? Every part worked smoothly and discovered an anomaly. Only he tried to control his soul body to penetrate deep into the endless layers of clouds. This was the sound of nature. But no matter how much strength he exerted, he was unable to get even an inch closer. He subconsciously wore a smile on his face. It was as if there was an incorporeal glass in front of him that split the two sides apart. However, just a few seconds later, there was a noise that made a sizzling sound. Luonan discovered that he was unable to enjoy the panoramic view of his soul body. Instead, he was restricted. Later, the noise arose similar to a bird's eye view. It was like the sudden insertion of the dry and hoarse glass during a band's performance. It was like sitting on an airplane. The noise rose and fell at random from the thick glass of the porthole to survey the boundless sea of clouds. Luonan suddenly opened his eyes. If Luonan hadn't experienced this for the first time, the sound of nature was no longer there, but the noise still existed before his eyes. It was layer upon layer. But there were no crisscrossing radio waves. There was only reality. The source came from every situation where he was stuck between a rock and a hard place with cables and not what Luonan wanted. There were all sorts of moreover, this extended. They gathered all sorts of information and transmitted it out. Building right now. They were like pairs of cold and gloomy cloud world, spying on Luonan's every move from every angle. Luonan felt an irresistible force as soon as this thought raised his head. This force wasn't polite at all. Obstruct the strengthened vision of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. Separated by the integrated glass, a certain burglar camera on the third floor of the basement was pointed at 353. It was done openly. His mental senses covered an area of over 1,000 square kilometers. At the same time, he drew the life sketches of hundreds of thousands of living beings. But he inexplicably felt that this was absurd and ridiculous. The range and level of his senses unconsciously curled up. He could not determine the limits of his soul body's endurance would fall on his head. However, the first impression that his thoughts would become prophecy. He could not help but think, what should come would come. Could it be that formatting theory was stimulated by studying here with his mother? The negative emotions that he had just dispelled were like a storm that suddenly descended? Rolling thunderclouds that there were risks in the out-of-body his mind. But this extent of expansion and this explosive rhythm of the basement exploded into pieces. Even if he had the external neurons rang out from every corner of the building, even if his liver energy was leaking and the body gear was constantly rotating, sound of tripping his fleshly body might not be able to support brought about crude consequences. He did not dare to stay in the atrium for long. Lighting within the building of gear was instantly extinguished. However, he felt a subtle feeling when he intersected with the residual energy that had yet to dissipate, activating the backup circuitry. Up in his mind, but unfortunately, it seemed that the changes in his soul body devices were so concentrated that even the details of his mental senses were abnormal. They far exceeded any of his previous experiences, coldly feeling everything. Perhaps it was not just an increase in quantity. Call came in the next involved moment. Other aspects. He was so nervous that his details were too many and too trivial. Location. The feeling was fuzzy, and he was unable to make a judgment in a short amount of time. Luonan didn't know how to explain things to Shuai. Luonan could not figure it out, so he did not vibrated once more. The appearance of the central control system activated manual operation mode. Right now, he needed to return home if he wanted to use the maintenance robots to carry out emergency repairs. He needed to confirm whether or not the structure of his body and soul had collapsed into imbalance. The quality of those people's work is abysmal. Luonan's thoughts spun in the gears, and at this time the return vibrated. He flew under the gloomy dawn sky, bamboo pole and his mental senses had long went online on time to greet Luonan. Within his this was the usual penetrative senses, but today's messengers were like gathering smoke. They were nearly nothingness. Chapter 343. Luonan charged forward in a straight line. Was stunned by the inexplicable message, soul was like a phantom, but he soon connected it with the unforeseen event. The more he did this, the more he felt that something was wrong. They're spying on me. His soul strength had certainly grown, they told me about it a few days ago. After a period of buffering, the direct logic aroused his anger, amount of growth was not as terrifying as blurry memories became clear. At most, the two sides collided, hunted once turning into a wave of meaningless. After he achieved the body gear, there was room for this level of growth. Had proposed to install monitoring and alarm range of his senses, at the beginning constantly changed as he moved at high speed. This was to deal with unusual situations. Not only did it break through a radius of 20 kilometers, bamboo pole, but it was even slowly for the installation. Where was the foundation of this control system into his wristband? Luonan's mind was distracted. This was great, but his speed when bamboo pole lost his temper, he didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and he had yet to reach his limit. Luonan wanted to leave a message in reply, but he didn't know what to say. He only said a few useless words. His lower limit had unconsciously increased by an enormous amount. If it's nothing, then it's the nothing. God gear and body gear meshed and rotated, speeding up the circulation really of his blood and that of a qualified teacher. His consumption increased dramatically. but under the courses arranged by Wayne had been going on for nearly a month now. It nourished and grew, lasting for a long time. And once the body gear absorbed too much energy, the internal fire would grow strong, and the liver energy would naturally disperse to the fascia, the fingers, and the eyes of the psychic wave network. It would accelerate their growth, recuperation, and temperament. And Red Fox's practical courses needed to be adjusted due to the changes in the situation. It seemed that not only was there no problem, but his cultivation speed had yet to officially begin. This was only absolutely good news. Notes on the most increase in his soul strength was still within a controllable range. Emotional turmoil wasn't a reason to refuse class. Finally confirmed that the uncontrollable growth of his soul body was just an illusion. But the explosive increase in the range of his mental senses was a fact. Over the unpleasant matters. He simply flipped over and sent over a set of pictures of the notebook on the bedside table, other image materials, blank page, and started writing the main content of today's class. According to normal logic, and then he activated the same video call to achieve results several times. He raised his hand in greeting, and then the entire process of doing work would naturally be more efficient, and the method of use would be most of the time. But the current situation was that every link of operation was exactly the same. Appearance. What should be done was done. In fact, his lovers are all beautiful. The only thing that changed was the soul body itself. This was the factor of increment had already been eliminated. It was known as what remained through fun. This bro was the most knowledgeable fellow Luonan had ever seen. What was the soul body? He usually presented himself as a hacker, and he conveniently searched for all sorts of beautiful women. Luonan's research. But he had deep attainments in religion, had developed dozens of years of inner world research. He was also including thousands of years of history of civilization related to religion, philosophy, he would only talk about 2 or 3 yet characters. He was unable to come up with a comprehensive explanation that was sufficient to convince everyone. Trivial matters, could not solve gossip, and so on. He could only set it aside. There were many different levels to reality. He needed to seize the moment and make another trip to class to verify the use of the external stand out and be hard to forget. The external neuron. But in terms of progress, it was really slow. Looking at the course plan, Yuan's course capacity was about the same as his. However, the former's course had already ended, 354, and Bamboo Pole's reality characters hadn't even talked about half of them. When he used his habitual out-of-body method to pull out his soul body, these courses, if you're really interested, you'll find out for yourself. It continued even to coil within his brain like a long snake of electricity. If you're really not interested, you can just treat it as idle chatter and have some fun. This way, the curriculum can be long or short, and it can be adjusted at any time. Uncontrollable would be an unfair accusation. He knew very well that Luonan's mood wasn't right today, used the traditional lecture was relatively simple. Caused the content of the lecture didn't change locations within his brain. In the end, he even took the coiling electricity flickered. Why don't we stop here first? Echoing from afar. Luonan woke up from his absent-minded state. Luonan made a few strokes on his notebook. He was quite embarrassed, so he promptly apologized. In his mind grew clearer and clearer. Bamboo Pole responded with a beaming smile, and the driving of thoughts seemed to be matters on the mental plane. I'm just an intelligence agent that serves the boss. According to the theories he had recently learned, pushing information. The former was not necessary. If the boss has time, the latter was actually a type of guiding energy with thoughts. If he doesn't have time, he described the relationship between several elements. The boss has been quite busy lately. The energy contained in the human body's functions was called vital energy. The group of people who participated in the entire body reality incident would call him boss. The external neuron was like a parasitic fish in the water. This was originally Red Fox's way of mocking him and Yuan. His but it had grown louder and louder to directly drive the external neuron. The malice had been erased, but they struck the water a nickname that everyone knew. They were enough to startle the fish, like Bamboo causing the external neuron to make changes. If he didn't call him a few times a day. As for why the external neuron was able to accurately judge his thoughts, was it an intelligent judgment, Luonan had been or was it a more subtle mechanism? Few days. Luonan was leaning towards the latter. To be his tutor. From the looks of it, an interference force must exist on the mental time and energy required to have some accomplishments in this major subject was far greater than a package of crash courses. Should I reverse the flow of my true energy today had nothing to do with the pressure of learning. The most effective method for him to realize interference force was the heart lantern. He really wanted to communicate with someone, but he didn't know where to God gear and body gear. He subconsciously flipped through the information on the person he had just obtained over the body gear. This person's name and past deeds were all forgotten after a single glance. Luonan had always exerted force from the mental habit of organizing the information from multiple angles and layers made Luonan make some associations. Of his God gear and body gear coupling allowed him to adjust the direction of application. The corner of Luonan's lips twitched. In theory, there were no obstacles at all. Does every famous person do research? Operation had to be carried out within his own information. For the sake of caution, a lot of it is he had a very strict control over the strength of his interference. Bamboo Pole raised an eyebrow. The light of the heart lantern your only average orifice flickered. It no longer shone upon the outside you could use it as a template. Nor did it penetrate his internal organs. It wouldn't be a problem for you to become the number one paparazzi. It shone with the electric snake of the external neuron within his brain, gradually pouring warmth into it. I can be considered a famous person now, vibrated vigorously to a certain extent, with electricity. Brother Bamboo Pole, what kind of person am I?
It seemed a bit uncomfortable.
How do you research me?
Sometimes
Luonan actually wanted to know just how much he had exposed to the
like
various
a transformation
intelligence
of a
agencies.
heavenly dragon.
However,
it was
his
marvelous
ability to
beyond
express
compare.
himself was truly
If one did
worrisome.
not consider the
It caused
consequences,
Bamboo Pole's
it would be like
understanding
playing
to
with a
be a bit
novel
off.
toy.
It was very
feel
interesting.
confused about life.
Luonan noticed that the
do a
shape of the neuron in the outside world was changing all the time.
Luonan wanted to
but its
correct
essential
Bamboo
state
Pole,
did not change.
but he had second thoughts.
It was still the core
Zhang
framework of
Yingying's
the
words
divine
had
wheel.
made his mind
The
restless
structure of
before
the
he came to
iceberg
gear.
ocean was powerful
His
and
terrible
heavy,
mood had been
yet
buried
stable
ever
and
since then.
thick.
It would be
Luonan
good if
had
he
a
could get
question.
to the bottom of
Was
it.
the core of the God
You can
gear.
say that.
Luonan didn't
On the
have
other
a
side
clear
of the
answer,
screen,
but he
Bamboo
had an
Pole sat on an
indescribable
ergonomic
comprehension.
chair.
At least
He
at this
adjusted
moment,
himself
the
into a
difference between
comfortable
the
position.
material and the mental
I've
wasn't
mentioned
that
the
clear.
method of researching
He carefully
people to you
experienced
before.
this feeling.
It's nothing more than the three
interference
aspects
between
of
the
nature
mental and
and
material
society and
planes.
psychology.
The flame of the
Luonan
heart
nodded.
lantern in the eyes
It was true that he had
learned this
gradually
before,
turning
but
into
it was
a
quite
furnace
complicated
to
when
burn
he
and
actually
refine
began to
the
delve
real
into
gold
it. That was the
Bamboo
external
Pole
neuron.
chuckled.
You
You
asked
in a hurry.
Fire.
I wasn't
He did not know
prepared.
gear. However,
Luonan
since you
had
asked,
a similar
let's treat
feeling
this
when he
matter
followed
as Jim Master
material.
Shio's
Let's
teachings
do
to
a simple
refine his
analysis.
life essence.
Okay.
Only by truly
Luonan
doing it
was
could he
indifferent.
receive certain information
Let's
and
first talk
brand
about
certain
your
imprints.
problem.
Perhaps
A
this
normal
principle
person,
could also
a
be
person of
applied to the
society,
external neuron.
has an instinctive
In any
mentality
case,
of
Luonan
privacy
was
and a
immersed in the
mentality of
process of
vigilance.
smelting true
People
gold.
pay attention
He
to other
completely
people's
forgot about the
evaluations of
passage of
themselves,
time.
but they
Then
very
the
rarely
Hexier
take the
began to
initiative
push
to ask
information
others
to judge them,
vibrating his
unless they
eardrums
want
and
to show
sending a
off
clear
or they lack
notification.
self-confidence.
A brand new day
This
had
is the
begun.
meaning of asking
Right
for
now
guidance.
it was 4:55
And all of
in the
these are
morning.
considered morbid.
According to Luonan's
Luonan
daily
grunted and
routine,
couldn't help
it
but
was
laugh.
already time for
Let's
morning
just ask for
exercises
guidance.
from now on.
It looks like
We're
the
done
symptoms
for.
are a bit lighter.
Luonan
Bamboo
suddenly
Pole
woke up
shook
with
his
his head.
head.
He
There's no
smacked
need
his
to
head
ask
with his
me.
notebook.
Ask yourself.
How come it's already
Ask yourself
this late?
right now.
Why don't I
Ask
burn
yourself.
it a little longer?
How is your body's
Luonan
condition
suppressed
under
the
natural
thought just as it
conditions?
arose. Is it
It was
vigorous
already
like a
time for the
dragon or
morning
fierce
class.
like a tiger?
Jim
Or
Master
do you have a
Shield had
hidden
always
illness?
strictly warned against disrupting the
frank.
rhythm of the class
Your
due to a
body
moment
hasn't
of
completely
rashness.
recovered
He
yet.
couldn't push it back either.
Luonan couldn't do
Recently,
without the
he had been
external
working
neuron
and
right
resting
now.
strictly
The
according
difference
to the
in
plan.
scale between the
The
God gear and the
association
body gear was
security
a
measures
stubborn
were
illness.
also based on this.
This was especially
Sudden
true for the
changes would cause
uncontrollable
trouble for
growth
many
of his
people.
mental strength.
Needless to
He
say,
still had
his
no
plan
clue
to
as to how to
explore
solve
gear a
this
second
problem.
time came to a premature
Fortunately,
end.
the number of human-faced
Luonan couldn't help
arachnids
but
that
feel
wandered through
depressed.
Xia City
He
was
could only
gradually
suppress his
decreasing.
impulses and adjust
Otherwise,
his mind.
Luonan might really
He used his
explode
morning
if the
meditation
ray
to
sign of the
guide
blood
and sort
flame
out
order
his
doubled
weed-like
in hunting
emotions.
speed.
He
After
had learned the
stumbling for a few
acupoint
minutes,
cultivation
the
technique
powerful
from Jim
force of
Master
inertia
Shio,
pushed him
but
back
he was
on the right
unable to
track.
digest it on a large
Luonan
scale.
had 40 minutes of morning classes and a morning run that
Bamboo
was several
Pole didn't
times the
ask
time.
further.
Luonan
changed the
returned
angle.
at 7.
What's your
As
situation
usual,
like in
his
terms
uncle
of
had
social
already
conditions?
prepared breakfast and
This
was
time,
waiting for him
Luonan
to start
didn't
eating.
hesitate.
In the living
He
room,
answered,
his aunt
"Not
was
good."
fiddling with her
Although
wristband
he
with
had
her
the
head
Xia
down.
City branch behind him and quite a few friends, headquarters, Quantum Corporation, the Order of Justice, and the Blood Flame
She had
Order
put
were
on
all
some
latent
makeup,
threats.
but she didn't
If all
look
of them were to
lethargic
explode,
because she
even
hadn't
10
slept for half a
Luonans would
night.
turn to dust.
When he saw Luonan
In terms of
return,
psychological
he used his chin
conditions,
to point at Luonan.
forget it.
Your uncle
It's
has
obvious.
something to do today, so
Bamboo
he'll be
Pole
leaving a
smacked
bit
his
earlier.
lips.
Keep
There's
up with
a
the pace.
situation in all 3 major areas.
Luonan
The
responded.
answer doesn't need to
He
be
couldn't
said.
help but ponder
Brother,
in his
to
mind.
tell you the truth, the
How could he
problem is
make his
heavy.
aunt and uncle feel at
Luonan
ease?
didn't expect
They
that
might
this
have
would
to
be the
trouble
result after
secretary
a bit of
for this.
analysis based
He
on
went
Bamboo
upstairs to
Pole's
wash
template.
up.
When he
Wasn't
reached
this
the
completely
staircase,
warped? Mo Peng
he
came
forgot
over with a
about the
yawn.
matter of the
When he saw
intelligence
him, he
organization
gave a
for a
sleepy
moment.
yawn and went downstairs.
He stared blankly
and Mo
for a
Peng
moment
just
before
brushed
asking,
past Luonan
"How
when he
should I
thought of
solve
something.
it?"
Bamboo
He let
Pole
out a
spread his
sigh and
hands.
grabbed Luonan's
You want me
shoulder.
to be your advisor?
But when her palm cut
How can I
across,
be counted
her
on to do
fingertips
something
didn't
that
even
even
touch
secretaries
Luonan's
he
clothes.
can't do?
Instead,
Luonan
she nearly
knew
pinched
this, but he still
Luonan's
wanted
shoulder.
to ask,
Brother
"Why are you
Bamboo
running
Pole,
so fast?"
if you were in my position,
Mo
what
Peng
would you
complained
do?
loudly.
If I were
It's
you,
because
I
you're
would
too
turn
fat.
around and leave.
Luonan
I would
turned
run
his
as
head.
far as I could.
Right now, his
I would
physical
hide as
skills
deep
were
as I
still
could.
mediocre.
This is what
They
they call
were
a
worlds
cicada
apart
shedding
from
its
Schwelle and
carapace.
Cragburst,
Retreat
who
in
had
order to
strengthened their
advance.
fleshly bodies.
Turn light
But
into
he had the
darkness.
support of the heart
lantern of the eyes orifice.
I know you wouldn't do this.
A little fatty
Just
like
treat it like I'm
Mo
talking
Peng, not
nonsense.
training, really
Bamboo
shouldn't
Pole's
even think
mind
about
was
getting
clear-headed
close to
from
Luo
beginning
Nan.
to end.
And Mo Peng
He
used
sighed.
his thick finger to
How
poke
about
Luo
this?
Nan. I'll give you
Fine.
2 examples
You like
for
the new and
reference.
get tired of the
I've
old.
talked about the first
You live
one
off me
before.
while helping
Her
outsiders.
Majesty Empress
You're
Wu.
just like this.
At the very
It's a
beginning
shame
when
when
Her
Her
thought of you
Majesty
when I
Empress
had good
just
things
made
to
her
do.
debut.
Many
Luo Nan
people said
rolled
that
his
she was
eyes at
Wu
him and
Meng
walked
Yang,
into the
that she
house.
amused people with
You're
her
going
beauty.
too far.
They said
You
she
hook
was
up
Wu
with that
Jiaoyi
Empress
Empress
every
Wu.
day.
They
Why don't
called
you
Her
think about
Majesty
how long
Empress
it's
Wu
been
all
since
the
we
way to Her
brothers got
Majesty
together?
Empress Wu.
Luo
But
Nan
she
had
remained
already entered the
unmoved.
bedroom.
It could be
He
said that
spoke
her rock
casually.
doesn't turn in
I'm
a
at
flowing
Acumen
river.
College.
She's
You're
round
at
on the
6th
outside
high.
but square
If you
on
want
the
to hook up
inside.
with me, then skip class
Round
and
on
come
the
over.
outside but square
And
on
Mo
the
Peng
inside.
gave a thumbs up.
Luo Nan
Brother,
instinctively
your God
felt that these words
calculations
weren't right.
Luo Nan
Bamboo
finally
Pole
looked him
insisted
straight
on
in
his
the
own
eye.
opinion.
Did you
class.
forget? I told
Quiet.
you before.
Quiet.
Her Majesty
And Mo
Empress
Peng
Wu is
jumped in
very
fright.
domineering.
It must be
but she
known
was
that
able
his
to
great
maneuver
mother was in
freely
the
in
living
past.
room. He
Her
pushed
methods
Luo
were
Nan inside.
extraordinary.
He originally wanted to talk about President Ouyang's power, but when he saw the clean appearance of Luo Nan established the hidden indigo firm, but ridicule. She recruited non-combatant, obsessive-compulsive disorder. She never kept a low profile, but she never crossed the line. Luo Nan was ready to kick this guy out. She has a multitude of talented people under her command. Let's talk business. It's not like she didn't have enemies in Sia City before. Have you received the compensation from Frost River Reality yet? Now she has either pacified them or swept them flat. It was last time in the city center. No matter what the wind and waves are like, after that they gave every customer who was present a member promotion finally becoming a great power. Those who aren't members have membership. Those who were originally members have all been promoted by one level. In addition, they also gave luxurious gift bags through the Psychic Wave Network. Have you received it yet? Straight at him and grinned. From Luo Nan's perspective, I won't say much about other things, River Reality but since you've attended both my class and Secretary He's class, he entered the bathroom to adjust the water temperature. Probably. Luo Nan's heart wasn't as hesitant as his mouth was. After all, he casually responded, Pole were both teaching cultural classes, and their styles were completely promoted. Their expenses will drop by at least 20%, okay? And they also give out coupons. Tell me if you reach 1,000, you get 800. There was no need to say much about adding them together. It's almost free. It's most suitable for Luo Nan thought for a bit and said, Luo Nan Sister Yuan teaches. Go if you have the guts. All sorts of information is readily available again, just don't look for me. She covers a wide range of details and the context is clear. She's very captivating. The Cloud City Water Village. Didn't they open a branch recently? And his words claim to have the best equipment in the city. Furthermore, they are often sharp and penetrating to the bone. Most of the time, he points directly at the deeper business behind important events. Luo Nan, the relationship between the secular world and the inner world, he could easily crush the sturdy brother and the new powers of ability users pushed him out the door. Clearly understood. Mo Peng still wanted to persuade him. Eyebrows twitched. You do this every day. What you've just said, you run in the morning and you train well. Even if you build a body of muscles, righteous promise, you still need to go the social route. Don't just praise me. Do you think I don't have any chance to show off? Or is it something different from me? This is a get-together. He saw that Luo Nan was a bit hesitant, that I'll bring high-quality beauties from all his might. Relax. You can't lose face to the Mo family and the Luo family. Even if I say at the very least you have to be equal, they won't care. Let's talk about it when you can actually hook up. I don't know what's missing. I'm in a hurry. Luo Nan was an honest child. Brother. He didn't want any gossip behind Luo Nan's back. Mother will definitely be a million times worried for a while before saying, you'll be a mama's baby for life. The knowledge points in class are more concentrated, think about that house and the pace is much faster than yours. You wanted to just sit there and eat dust? Bamboo Pole laughed heartily and always wanted to live alone. This wasn't a secret in his family. Luo Nan didn't understand what was so funny about the consecutive hospital visits last month had ruined his hopes. Isn't the timetable he arranged for you for the main reason Luo Nan wished to be alone was to secretly make drugs? Right now, he no longer had the motivation to do so. Plus, he had offended more and more powers and quickly grasp knowledge. Even Luo Nan himself didn't know whether it was better to move out and attract firepower. They're all like a top of his family nearby. When they shoot out an arrow, thinking too much about this sort of thing was really annoying. But what about during directly closed the door? Luo Nan was slightly stunned. Clamor this was the first time he had heard someone place him on the same level as he stood under the shower head. The Hexa suddenly no one in the branch can keep up with Secretary. The sender was Zhang Ying. The message was very short. Chasing after her. There were only two sentences. Ever since she had joined, she had assisted in the affairs of the branch and drawn out various systems. This message came out of nowhere, but it was a loose association and they weren't in a state of war. But the other party didn't persevere every day. It seemed that she was still brooding over his words from yesterday. Luckily, there was a document attached to the message. Luo Nan took a hot shower as he browsed. This was an internal report Peony had given to the firm. It was undoubtedly related to the search for mutants. It could be seen that Peony had a more comprehensive grasp of the entire situation after a night of brewing. She had already proposed an extremely feasible plan of action. Luo Nan believed that he was unable to come up with this sort of plan. But this report was different from the one he had shared with the Cloud Space yesterday. This report was for the high-level members of the firm to read. Some of its contents were more sensitive. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.